I was excluded from my only granddaughter's wedding. No one told me. Not even my daughter. On the day of the ceremony, I rushed to the church and was stopped at the door. But I left something on the pew that the pastor made sure to read over the microphone. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I never thought my heart could shatter into so many pieces until I saw that photograph on Facebook at 9:37 on a Tuesday morning. There was my granddaughter Hannah, radiant in white lace, standing beside a man I'd never met, surrounded by faces I recognized but who had clearly forgotten I existed. My coffee cup slipped from my trembling fingers, hitting the kitchen floor with a crash that seemed to echo through my empty house. Brown liquid spread across the linoleum like the realization spreading through my mind. I had been erased from the most important day of my granddaughter's life. The post was from my neighbor Carol, of all people. Such a beautiful ceremony yesterday. Congratulations to the happy couple. Yesterday. The wedding had happened yesterday, and I was finding out about it from a neighbor's social media post. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, staring at the screen of my laptop, reading and rereading those words. Hannah was married. My Hannah, the little girl who used to spend every summer with me, who called me her best friend grandma, who promised we'd always be close no matter what. She was married and I wasn't there. My hand shook as I scrolled through the comments. Lily, my own daughter, had responded with heart emojis and, "Thank you. It was perfect. Perfect. A perfect wedding that didn't include the grandmother who had changed Hannah's diapers, taught her to bake cookies, held her through every nightmare when she was little." I clicked on Hannah's profile with desperate hope, thinking maybe there was some explanation. Maybe I had missed an invitation somehow. But her page showed nothing but happiness photos from the engagement party I never knew about, bridal shower pictures where I should have been, rehearsal dinner images filled with David's family and friends I didn't recognize. When had I become invisible to them? I tried to remember the last time I'd spoken to Hannah. It had been months, maybe 6, maybe more. Our conversations had grown shorter, less frequent. Lily always had reasons why Hannah couldn't talk long, couldn't visit. She was busy with work, busy with her boyfriend, now husband, apparently busy with life. I had told myself it was normal for young people to be occupied with their own lives. But this wasn't normal. This was deliberate. My mind drifted back to when Hannah was 7 years old, after Lily's messy divorce from her first husband. Lily had fallen apart completely, drinking too much, disappearing for days. Hannah had lived with me for almost 8 months that year. I was the one who braided her hair for school pictures, who helped with homework, who tucked her in every night. She had been my little shadow, following me around the house, helping me garden, learning to cook my grandmother's recipes. "Grandma Sandra, will you always be here for me?" she had asked one night, her small hand in mine as I read her a bedtime story. "Always, sweetheart. No matter what happens, Grandma will always love you." That promise felt like a lie now. Sitting in my empty kitchen surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee. I hadn't been there for the most important day of her life because I hadn't even known it was happening. I forced myself to keep scrolling through the wedding photos, each one a fresh stab of pain. Hannah looked beautiful, genuinely happy. But I couldn't help noticing how Lily positioned herself prominently in every family photo. The mother of the bride, basking in attention, accepting congratulations for raising such a wonderful daughter. No mention anywhere of the grandmother who had actually done much of that raising. David's family filled the other side of every picture. His parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, all beaming with joy at welcoming Hannah into their family. They looked like the kind of close-knit family I had always hoped we could be. The kind where grandmothers weren't forgotten or pushed aside. I noticed something else that made my stomach clench with fresh hurt. In the background of one photo, I could see an empty chair at what was clearly the family table. A chair that should have been mine. They had planned this wedding knowing I wouldn't be there. They had deliberately excluded me, and then continued with their celebration as if my absence meant nothing. The worst part was how normal everyone looked, how genuinely happy. This wasn't a hastily planned elopement or a small, intimate ceremony where space was limited. This was a full wedding with what looked like over 100 guests. There had been room for me. There had been time to include me. They simply chose not to. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence of my house, feeling more alone than I had since my husband died 5 years ago. At least then, I'd had Lily and Hannah to lean on. They had been my comfort, my reason to keep going. Now I realized that comfort had been an illusion, and I had been living on borrowed time in their lives. The phone sat on the counter, and for a moment I considered calling Lily to demand an explanation. But what would I say? Why didn't you tell me my granddaughter was getting married? The question itself revealed how far I had fallen in their estimation. Grandmothers who mattered didn't have to ask such questions. Instead, I found myself remembering Hannah's laugh, the way she used to run to me whenever Lily picked her up from my house, arms wrapped around my neck, whispering secrets in my ear. When had that little girl who loved me so completely turned into a woman who could get married without even telling me? The answer was painful but clear. She hadn't. Someone had turned her against me, slowly and carefully, until I became a stranger she could forget without a second thought. I didn't think it through. Maybe if I had been thinking clearly, I would have realized how foolish it was, how humiliating it would become. But grief and desperation don't leave room for logic, and I found myself grabbing my car keys at 10:15 that morning, still wearing my house slippers and an old cardigan, racing towards St. Mary's Church downtown. The wedding was yesterday, I kept repeating to myself as I drove, but maybe there was still something I could do. Maybe I could catch them before they left for their honeymoon. Maybe I could see Hannah and ask her why I had been forgotten. Maybe I could salvage some small piece of this relationship that meant everything to me. Traffic seemed to mock my urgency. Every red light felt like an eternity, every slow driver like a deliberate obstacle. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, and I found myself talking to the empty car, practicing what I would say when I saw them. Hannah, sweetheart, I just found out about your wedding. I would have loved to be there. Too pathetic. I can't believe I missed your special day. Too accusatory. Congratulations on your marriage, honey. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to celebrate with you. Better, but it still sounded hollow to my own ears. By the time I reached the church parking lot, my heart was hammering against my ribs. There were still cars scattered around. Maybe they were having photos taken, maybe there was still a reception happening. I parked crookedly and hurried toward the church entrance, my slippers making soft wisping sounds against the concrete. The heavy wooden doors were propped open, and I could hear voices and laughter echoing from inside. My step quickened with hope. They were still here. I could still see Hannah, still be part of this day somehow, even if it was just for a few minutes. But as I approached the entrance, a figure stepped into my path. David, Lily's husband, blocking my way with his arms crossed and a grim expression on his face. Behind him, I could see into the church where people were indeed still gathered, Hannah's white dress visible among the crowd near the altar. Sandra. His voice was flat, unwelcoming. What are you doing here? The question hit me like a slap. What was I doing here? I was trying to see my granddaughter on her wedding day. I was trying to be part of my own family. But the way he said it, the way he looked at me like I was some kind of intruder, made me feel instantly foolish. I just found out about Hannah's wedding, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wanted to congratulate her, to see her before you all leave. David's expression didn't soften. If anything, he looked more uncomfortable. This isn't a good time, Sandra. The family is trying to finish up the pictures and get ready for the reception. Family. He said it like I wasn't part of it, like I was some distant acquaintance who had wandered in uninvited. Through the doorway, I could see Lily adjusting Hannah's veil, both of them laughing at something. The sight of them together, so happy and complete without me, made my throat tighten. I won't stay long, I said, taking a step toward the door. I just want to see her for a minute. David moved to block me more firmly. I really think it would be better if you called later. After they get back from their honeymoon, maybe. After their honeymoon. After all the celebrating was done. After all the joy had been shared and remembered by everyone except me. I would be allowed to offer my congratulations weeks later, like an afterthought, like someone who didn't really matter. David, please. My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay composed. She's my granddaughter. I raised her for months when she was little. I just want to wish her well. Something flickered across his face, maybe guilt, maybe pity. But before he could respond, Lily appeared beside him. She must have seen me from inside, must have sent him to intercept me. Her face was flushed. Whether from the excitement of the day or anger at my unexpected arrival, I couldn't tell. Mother, what are you doing here? She kept her voice low, but there was steel in it. I saw the pictures on Facebook, I said, hating how small and pathetic I sounded. I didn't know Hannah was getting married. Lily's jaw tightened. We sent you an invitation. The lie was so bold, so shameless that it took me a moment to process it. No, you didn't. We sent it to your old address. You never responded, so we assumed you didn't want to come. I had lived in the same house for 32 years. The house where Lily grew up, where Hannah had spent countless summers and holidays. There was no old address and Lily knew it. But she was creating a story for David's benefit, for the other guests who might overhear, making me the grandmother who couldn't be bothered to attend her granddaughter's wedding. Lily, I live in the same house I've always lived in. You know that. Her expression hardened. Well, we're in the middle of family photos right now, and Hannah doesn't need any drama on her wedding day. Drama. As if my presence would be dramatic. As if a grandmother wanting to congratulate her granddaughter was some kind of scene-causing intrusion. I could see past them into the church, where Hannah was now posing with what looked like David's family, all of them laughing and embracing. She looked radiant, completely absorbed in her happiness, oblivious to the conversation happening at the church entrance. I don't want to cause any problems, I said quietly. I just want to tell her I love her and I'm happy for her. You can send a card, Lily said dismissively. David, could you walk my mother back to her car? I need to get back to Hannah. The humiliation was complete. I was being escorted away from my granddaughter's wedding like some kind of unwanted solicitor. David looked uncomfortable but didn't argue with his wife. He stepped aside and gestured toward the parking lot. I'm sorry, Sandra. Maybe we can arrange a dinner soon after things settle down. I looked one more time toward the church interior, hoping to catch Hannah's eye, hoping she might see me and run over with a hug and an explanation for why I hadn't been included. But she was facing away from the entrance, surrounded by people who loved her, people who belonged there. As I walked back to my car with David trailing behind me like a reluctant security guard, I could hear the sounds of celebration continuing inside the church. Laughter, conversations, the photographer calling out instructions for the next pose. Life moving forward without me. Joy being shared by everyone except the woman who had helped raise the bride. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, watching David return to the church, watching him rejoin the celebration I had been barred from. Through the windows I could see the warm light inside, the moving figures of family and friends, the life I was no longer part of. That's when the idea came to me. Sitting in my car in that church parking lot, feeling more alone and discarded than I had ever felt in my life, I remembered the letter in my purse. The letter I had started writing to Hannah weeks ago but never sent. The one where I had finally decided to tell her the truth about her mother's past, about the things Lily had made me promise never to reveal. Maybe it was time Hannah knew the whole story. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the folded letter in my trembling hands. It was 3 pages long, written on my good stationery with the blue roses, the one Hannah had always admired when she was little. I had started it 6 weeks ago during one of those sleepless nights when memories kept me awake, when the weight of secrets felt too heavy to carry alone anymore. The letter contained everything Lily had made me swear never to tell. Everything about those 8 months when Hannah was 7 and Lily had disappeared into a bottle, leaving her daughter with me while she figured things out. Everything about the nights I held Hannah while she cried for her mommy, the mornings I braided her hair for school and packed her lunches, the parent-teacher conferences I attended because Lily was too drunk or too ashamed to show up. I had written about the time Hannah got sick with pneumonia and spent 3 days in the hospital while Lily was at some rehab facility 2 states away. How I slept in the uncomfortable chair beside Hannah's bed. How I was the one who held her hand when she was scared. How I was the one listed as her emergency contact because her own mother was unreachable. The letter told the truth about who had really raised Hannah during the most critical year of her childhood, who had been there for every scraped knee, every bad dream, every moment when a little girl needed someone to love her unconditionally. It wasn't the mother who was now basking in congratulations for raising such a wonderful daughter. But I had never sent it because Lily had begged me not to. It would destroy Hannah's image of me, she had pleaded during one of our rare conversations. She's happy now. Why ruin that? And I had kept quiet as I always did, protecting Lily's reputation even as she slowly erased me from both their lives. Now, sitting in this church parking lot, watching my granddaughter celebrate the happiest day of her life without me. That protective instinct felt like the cruelest joke I had ever played on myself. I looked back toward the church. The celebration was winding down. I could see people starting to move toward what looked like a reception hall attached to the building. Soon they would all leave for the dinner party I hadn't been invited to, and this moment would be lost forever. My hands made the decision before my mind caught up. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into my purse and got out of the car. The church entrance was now unguarded. David and Lily were probably inside making sure everything was perfect for the next phase of the celebration. I could hear voices and movement coming from the reception hall, but the main sanctuary seemed empty except for a few stragglers gathering personal items. I slipped inside, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The church was beautiful, decorated with white roses and baby's breath. Exactly the kind of elegant simplicity Hannah had always loved. For a moment I allowed myself to imagine what it would have been like to see her walk down this aisle, to watch her face as she said her vows, to be part of the joy instead of sneaking around its edges like a thief. The wooden pews still held programs and a few forgotten items. A grandmother's purse, someone's sweater, a child's forgotten toy. I moved quickly toward the front, where the family section would have been, where my seat should have been if I had mattered enough to include. The letter felt like it weighed nothing and everything at the same time as I pulled it from my purse. I had addressed it simply. For Hannah, from Grandma Sandra, things I should have told you long ago. My handwriting looked shaky on the envelope, but the words inside were steady and true. I placed it carefully on the seat that should have been mine, in the front pew where the mother of the bride's family would have sat, where I would have cried happy tears watching my granddaughter promise her life to someone who loved her, where I would have felt proud and included and necessary instead of forgotten and discarded. The letter seemed small sitting there on the burgundy velvet cushion, but I knew its contents could change everything. Hannah would finally understand why her early childhood memories were so different from the stories her mother told. She would know who had really been there during her darkest moments, who had really sacrificed and loved and protected her when she needed it most. "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you with something?" I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. A young man in a suit, probably one of the ushers, was walking toward me with a polite but questioning expression. Behind him, I could see other people starting to filter back into the sanctuary, probably to collect forgotten items before heading to the reception. I dropped something earlier, I stammered, backing away from the pew where the letter sat. "During the ceremony." He nodded pleasantly, not seeming suspicious. "Did you find it? I can help you look." "Yes, thank you. I found it." I moved quickly toward the side aisle, trying to put distance between myself and the letter before he noticed it. "Beautiful ceremony. Such a lovely couple." "They really are," he agreed, his attention already shifting to other guests who were gathering their belongings. "The reception should be wonderful too." I made it to the church entrance without anyone questioning my presence further. As I reached the door, I turned back one more time to see the letter still sitting where I had left it, waiting like a small white bomb that would soon explode the carefully constructed story Lily had built around Hannah's childhood. A part of me wanted to run back and retrieve it, to protect my daughter from the consequences of her past actions, to keep the peace as I always had. But a larger part of me, the part that had been ignored and dismissed and forgotten today, wanted Hannah to know the truth. Wanted her to understand that she had been loved completely and sacrificially by someone who was now being erased from her life, as if that love had never mattered. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter and more terrified than I had in years. There was no taking it back now. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. As I drove away from St. Mary's Church, I could see in my rearview mirror that people were starting to move from the sanctuary toward the reception hall. Soon someone would find the letter. Soon Pastor Williams, who had performed the ceremony, would have to decide what to do with a grandmother's final attempt to be heard by the granddaughter who no longer knew her. I thought about Hannah reading those pages, learning about the night she had crawled into my bed during thunderstorms while her mother was passed out in some bar. About the Christmas morning when Lily didn't show up and I had to explain to a 7-year-old why Mommy wasn't there to see her open presents. About the time Hannah asked me if I thought her mommy still loved her, and how I had held her and promised that everything would be okay even though I wasn't sure it ever would be. Maybe I was wrong to tell her these things on what should be the happiest day of her life. Maybe I was being selfish, trying to reclaim my place in her heart through painful revelations about her mother. But Hannah deserved to know why I had been pushed out of her life, why the woman who had been her anchor through the worst year of her childhood was now deemed unworthy of attending her wedding. She deserved to know that being forgotten by her hadn't been my choice. I was home barely 30 minutes when my phone started ringing. Unknown number. Then another. Then another. I let them all go to voicemail, my hands shaking as I made myself a cup of tea, and tried to pretend I hadn't just set something irreversible into motion. It wasn't until the fourth call that I recognized Lily's number, and the fury in her voice when I finally answered made it clear that my letter had been found much sooner than I expected. "What the hell did you do?" She hissed into the phone, her voice low and venomous. I could hear noise in the background: music, laughter, the sounds of a reception in full swing. "What did you put in that letter?" My hands trembled around my teacup. "The truth, Lily. Things Hannah had a right to know. You had no right." Her voice cracked with rage and something else: panic. "No right to ruin her wedding day with your bitter old woman nonsense." Before I could respond, she hung up. I set the phone down with shaking fingers and tried to imagine what was happening at that reception hall. Had they found the letter already? Had someone read it? The thought of Hannah learning those painful truths surrounded by wedding guests and celebration made my stomach clench with regret. Maybe I had made a terrible mistake. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see David standing on my front porch, still in his wedding suit but looking disheveled and grim. I opened the door cautiously. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. I stepped aside to let him in, my heart pounding. "Is Hannah okay?" David ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I had seen him make whenever he was stressed. "Pastor Williams found your letter during the cleanup. He thought it was a special message from family that had been left for the couple to find after the ceremony." Oh no. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He read it. To everyone. David's voice was flat. During the reception, he announced that he had found a beautiful letter from the bride's grandmother and wanted to share her loving words with all the guests. I sank into my armchair, the blood draining from my face. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. The letter was meant for Hannah privately, not for public consumption at her wedding reception. How much did he read? All of it. David sat heavily on my couch, looking older than his 45 years. Every word about Lily's drinking, about Hannah living with you, about the nights in the hospital. Everything. The room felt like it was spinning. I had wanted Hannah to know the truth, but not like this. Not in front of her new husband's family, not in front of all their friends, not surrounded by the celebration of what should have been the happiest day of her life. "Where is Hannah now?" I whispered. "She locked herself in the bridal suite bathroom," David said quietly. "She's been in there for 20 minutes. Won't talk to anyone, not even her new husband. Lily is outside the door crying and begging her to come out, telling everyone that you're a vindictive old woman who made everything up." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what I had done settling over me like a heavy blanket. "And what does Hannah think?" David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I think Hannah remembers more than Lily hoped she would. She kept saying, 'I remember over and over' before she locked herself away." The silence stretched between us, filled with the distant sound of my kitchen clock ticking and the weight of consequences I hadn't fully considered. Finally, David leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Sandra, I need you to help me understand something. Is what you wrote in that letter true? All of it?" I met his eyes, seeing genuine confusion and concern there. David was a good man. I had always thought so, even when I disagreed with how he supported Lily's decision to cut me out of their lives. He worked hard, loved my daughter, and seemed to genuinely care about Hannah. He deserved an honest answer. "Every word," I said simply. "I have medical records from Hannah's hospital stay, school records from when I was listed as her guardian, photographs from that whole period. Lily was in and out of rehab facilities for almost a year. Hannah lived with me because there was nowhere else for her to go." David's face went pale. "Lily told me you were being dramatic, that you only watched Hannah occasionally when she had to work late or travel for her job. Is that what she said?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "David, Hannah called me mama for 2 months because Lily had been gone so long she forgot what her mother looked like. I still have the drawings Hannah made during that time, pictures of her and me in my garden, pictures of us baking cookies, pictures of the two of us at the park because I was the only parent figure in her life. David stood up abruptly and walked to my window, staring out at the street. Why didn't Hannah remember all this clearly? Why didn't she ever mention it? Because she was 7 years old during the worst of it, I said gently. And because Lily worked very hard to rewrite that history once she got sober. She told Hannah that Grandma Sandra just liked to babysit a lot, that Mommy was always there when it really mattered. Children want to believe their parents are perfect. It's easier than accepting that they were abandoned. But Hannah is 26 now. Surely she has some memories. Fragments, I said. Pieces that don't fit the story her mother told her. I'm sure she's always wondered why she remembered my house so clearly, why she knew where everything was in my kitchen, why she had so many clothes and toys there. Lily probably explained it all away as evidence of what a fun grandmother I was, how much Hannah loved visiting me. David turned back to me, his expression troubled. The letter mentioned specific dates, specific incidents. You wrote about Hannah's appendicitis scare when she was 8, about how Lily missed the parent-teacher conference that year. Hannah was 7 when she had appendicitis, not 8. And Lily didn't miss that conference, she was in court-ordered rehab. I went instead and had to present temporary guardianship papers to prove I had the right to make medical decisions for Hannah. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out a thick folder. I kept everything from that time, David. Not because I planned to use it against Lily someday, but because I knew Hannah might need those records eventually. Medical history, school transcripts, emergency contact information. All of it with my name on it for almost a full year. David stared at the folder in my hands. Can I see some of that? I hesitated. This felt like crossing another line. Sharing private family documents with someone who hadn't been part of our family then. But David wasn't just anyone. He was Hannah's stepfather now, and more importantly, he seemed to genuinely want to understand the truth. I opened the folder and pulled out a few key documents. Hannah's hospital admission forms from her appendicitis surgery, with my name listed as guardian and emergency contact. Report cards from 2nd grade with notes from teachers addressed to Mrs. Sandra Miller, Hannah's grandmother and current caregiver. A Christmas card Hannah had made for me that year with a drawing of our family. Just her and me, no one else. David examined each document carefully, his expression growing more troubled with each page. These dates. This is exactly when Lily told me she was traveling for work. She said business was so good she had to be on the road constantly. She wasn't lying entirely, I said quietly. She was traveling. To rehab facilities, to court appearances, to meetings with social workers. I covered for her because I thought it would be better for Hannah if fewer people knew how bad things had gotten. David sank back down onto my couch, the papers still in his hands. So when Hannah reads this letter, really reads it and processes it, she's going to realize that her mother has been lying to her for 19 years about the most important relationship of her childhood. I nodded, feeling the full weight of what I had unleashed. And she's going to realize that I've been lying too, by staying silent all these years to protect Lily's reputation. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us contemplating the explosion that was probably still happening at the wedding reception. Finally, David spoke again. What do you want to happen now, Sandra? What's your endgame here? I considered the question carefully. I don't want to destroy Lily's relationship with Hannah. Despite everything, Lily did get sober and she has been a good mother since then. But I want Hannah to understand why I've been slowly disappearing from her life. I want her to know that it wasn't my choice to become a stranger to her. David nodded slowly. And you want your granddaughter back. I want my granddaughter to know that she was loved completely and unconditionally during the scariest time of her childhood. I said, my voice breaking slightly. I want her to know that someone fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself. David's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a grimace. Lily. She wants to know where I am. He looked up at me. I should probably get back. But Sandra, I think you should be prepared for Hannah to want to see you soon. That letter didn't just expose Lily's lies. It reminded Hannah of how much she loved you. The knock on my door came at 8:47 that evening, soft but persistent. I had been sitting in my living room since David left, unable to concentrate on anything, jumping every time my phone buzzed with another unknown number. Through the peephole, I saw Hannah standing on my porch, still in her wedding dress but with her veil gone and her carefully styled hair now loose around her shoulders. My hand shook as I opened the door. She looked older than her 26 years, her face pale and streaked with dried tears, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. We stood there for a moment, grandmother and granddaughter, separated by years of manipulation and misunderstanding, but connected by a love that had never really died. "Grandma Sandra." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Hannah walked into my living room and stood there looking around, her eyes taking in details I wasn't sure she had noticed since childhood. The photographs on the mantel that still included her, even recent ones I had printed from social media. The throw pillow she had made for me in a summer camp craft class when she was 9. The rocking chair where I used to read to her during those long months when she lived with me. "I remember this room," she said softly, running her finger along the back of my couch. "I remember sitting right here doing homework while you made dinner. I remember the way it smelled like vanilla candles and the lavender soap you always used." I stood frozen by the door, afraid to move or speak, afraid I might somehow break this fragile moment. Hannah walked to the mantel and picked up a photograph of the two of us from her 8th birthday, a party I had thrown because Lily was still too unstable to manage celebrations then. "Mom told me this was just a fun day we spent together," Hannah said, staring at the picture. "She said you liked to spoil me with parties and presents because you were such a doting grandmother. But I lived here, didn't I? This was my home for a while." "For 8 months," I said quietly. "You had your own room upstairs. You picked out purple curtains because they were your favorite color then." Hannah looked up at me, tears fresh in her eyes. "I remember those curtains. I used to dream about them sometimes and wonder why I felt so homesick for a room that wasn't mine." She set the photograph down carefully. "Except it was mine, wasn't it?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Hannah moved to the window that faced my backyard garden, where she had spent countless hours helping me plant flowers and chase butterflies. "The letter you wrote," she said, her back still to me. "Every word of it was true? Every word." She turned around then, and I could see the little girl I remembered in her face. Confused, hurt, looking for someone to make sense of a world that didn't feel safe. "Why didn't you ever tell me? All these years, why did you let me believe Mom's version of everything?" The question I had been dreading, the one I had asked myself countless times during the lonely years when Hannah slowly disappeared from my life. "Because your mother begged me not to. She said it would destroy your relationship with her, and she was probably right. She was trying to build a new life, trying to be the mother you deserved. I thought protecting that was more important than protecting my own relationship with you. But you lost me anyway," Hannah said, and the pain in her voice cut straight through me. "By staying quiet, you lost me anyway." "I know." The words came out as barely a whisper. "I know that now." Hannah moved to my bookshelf, where I still kept some of her childhood favorites. She pulled out a worn copy of Charlotte's Web and opened it to the front page, where her 7-year-old handwriting declared in purple crayon, "This book belongs to Hannah and Grandma Sandra." "I remember writing this," she said, showing me the inscription. "I remember insisting that it belonged to both of us because you read it to me every night for weeks. But Mom always told me I was just visiting when that happened, that I went home to her every night." "You went home to her on weekends when she was having good days," I said carefully. "But during the week, when she was in treatment or court-ordered programs, you stayed here. This was your safe place." Hannah closed the book and held it against her chest. "I have fragments of memories that never made sense. Waking up in a purple room and feeling completely at home. Knowing exactly where the cookies were hidden in your kitchen. Having dreams about a woman with dark hair who smelled like cigarettes and sadness, but Mom doesn't smoke and she's always seemed so put together. Your mother went through a very dark time after her divorce," I said gently. "She was depressed, drinking too much, unable to take care of herself, let alone you. But she got help, Hannah. She got sober and she became the mother she wanted to be. That part of her story is true. But she erased you from the story completely." Hannah's voice was getting stronger, anger mixing with the hurt. "She made me believe you were just the fun grandmother who spoiled me occasionally, not the woman who raised me through the worst year of her life. She let me drift away from you, Let me think you didn't care when I got busy with college and work and dating. I sat down heavily in my rocking chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. I think she was afraid that if you knew the truth, you would love her less and blame her for those lost months. She wanted to be the hero of your childhood story, not the broken woman who needed her own mother to step in and save her daughter. So she made you disappear instead. Hannah's voice was bitter now. She let me think you were getting old and boring, that you didn't really want to be bothered with a busy young adult. She encouraged me to give you space, told me you understood that I had my own life to live now. The pieces were falling into place, the careful manipulation that had slowly but surely distanced Hannah from me over the years. Every canceled visit explained away by my supposed need for rest. Every shortened phone call attributed to my alleged discomfort with modern technology. Every missed birthday or holiday justified by my supposed preference for quiet celebrations. She convinced me that calling you too often would be a burden, Hannah continued, pacing now in her wedding dress. That old people don't like to be bothered with the day-to-day drama of young people's lives. I believed her because I wanted to be considerate, because I thought I was protecting you from feeling obligated to stay involved in my messy 20s. And I believed her when she said you were too busy for an old grandmother, I admitted. When she said you had outgrown our relationship, that it was natural for young people to move on. I didn't want to be the clingy grandmother who couldn't let go. Hannah stopped pacing and stared at me. We were both protecting each other from things that weren't even real. Meanwhile, she got exactly what she wanted, a relationship with me that wasn't complicated by anyone who remembered her at her worst. The anger in Hannah's voice was growing, and I found myself worried about what this revelation would do to her relationship with Lily. Despite everything, I didn't want to destroy that bond completely. Hannah, your mother loves you deeply. She made mistakes, serious ones, but she's been a good mother to you for the past 19 years. Don't let my letter destroy everything good you've built together. Hannah looked at me with something that might have been pity. Grandma, she didn't invite you to my wedding. She barred you from the most important day of my life, and made me believe you didn't want to be there. Even if I can forgive the lies about my childhood, how do I forgive that? I had no answer for that question because I couldn't forgive it either. Protecting Lily's reputation was one thing, but deliberately excluding me from Hannah's wedding was a cruelty I still couldn't fully comprehend. Where is your mother now? I asked. At the hotel, crying and telling everyone who will listen that you're a bitter old woman trying to ruin her life, Hannah said flatly. David is trying to calm her down, but I think he's starting to see through some of her stories too. She's panicking because her carefully constructed narrative is falling apart. Hannah walked back to the mantel and picked up another photograph, this one of her high school graduation, where I stood proudly beside her while Lily smiled for the camera. Even then, Lily had positioned herself as the proud mother while I was just the supportive grandmother in the background. I'm supposed to leave for my honeymoon tomorrow, Hannah said quietly. But I can't. Not until I understand how much of my life has been built on lies, and how much of my relationship with you I've lost because of them. She turned to face me, and in her eyes I saw the determined little girl who used to demand bedtime stories and refused to go to sleep until she got them. I want you to tell me everything, Grandma. Not just the bad parts about Mom, but the good parts too. I want to know what really happened during those months, and I want to understand why you both thought protecting me from the truth was more important than letting me make my own decisions about who to love and how to love them. I looked at my granddaughter standing in my living room in her wedding dress, ready to hear painful truths on what should have been the happiest day of her life, and I realized that Hannah had grown into exactly the kind of woman I had hoped she would become, strong enough to face difficult realities, brave enough to demand honesty even when it hurt. It's going to take a while, I warned her. I have all night, she said simply. And honestly, Grandma, I have 19 years of catching up to do. We talked until 3 in the morning. Hannah curled up on my couch in her wedding dress, listening as I pulled out photo albums and medical records and school papers, piecing together the year that had been erased from her official family history. I told her about the good times too, how proud I had been to watch her learn to ride a bike in my driveway, how she had helped me bake Christmas cookies for the entire neighborhood, how she used to fall asleep in my lap while I read to her every single night. By the time the sun started to rise, Hannah's anger had settled into something quieter but more resolute. She had cried when I showed her the drawings she had made of our little family during those months, pictures that showed just how much she had needed stability and love during her mother's breakdown. But she had also smiled when I told her about the day she announced she was going to marry me when she grew up because I made the best pancakes in the world. "I need to postpone the honeymoon," she said as I made us coffee in the early morning light. "Marcus will understand. I can't pretend everything is normal when my entire childhood history has just been rewritten." Marcus was her new husband, a kind man from what I had observed in the wedding photos. I hoped he would indeed understand, hoped their marriage was strong enough to weather this immediate crisis. "What about your mother?" I asked carefully. Hannah was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. "I don't know yet. I love her, Grandma, but I feel like I don't actually know her." How do you rebuild a relationship with someone when you discover they've been editing your shared history for almost 20 years? It was a fair question, one I couldn't answer for her. The phone had been ringing intermittently all night. Lily's number, David's number, unknown numbers that were probably other family members who had heard about the wedding reception drama. Hannah had ignored them all. "She's going to want to explain," I said. "She's probably terrified right now that she's lost you completely." "She should be terrified," Hannah said, and there was steel in her voice that reminded me of myself at her age. "Not because I'm planning to cut her out of my life, but because she needs to understand that actions have consequences. You can't manipulate someone for decades and then expect forgiveness just because you finally got caught." As if summoned by our conversation, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Lily standing on my porch, still in her mother-of-the-bride dress from yesterday, looking haggard and desperate. David stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder in what looked like moral support rather than agreement. Hannah and I looked at each other. "Are you ready for this?" I asked. "No," she said honestly. "But it needs to happen." I opened the door to find my daughter's face streaked with tears, her carefully applied makeup from yesterday now smudged and faded. She looked older than her 47 years, worn down by a night of crisis management and panic. "Hannah, sweetheart, please come home with me," Lily said immediately, reaching past me toward her daughter. "We need to talk about this rationally, away from her influence." Hannah stepped back, avoiding her mother's reaching hands. "Her influence? Mom, I'm 26 years old. I think I can handle hearing the truth about my own childhood without being unduly influenced." "She's poisoned you against me," Lily said, her voice rising with desperation. "She's taken one difficult year from decades ago and made it sound like I was a terrible mother. She's manipulating you, just like she's always tried to manipulate our family." I felt the familiar urge to step in, to defend myself or to try to smooth things over as I had done so many times before. But this wasn't my fight anymore. This was between Hannah and her mother, and Hannah was strong enough to handle it herself. "Mom, stop," Hannah said firmly. "Just stop. I'm not poisoned or manipulated. I'm hurt. I'm hurt that you lied to me for 19 years about the most important relationship of my childhood. I'm hurt that you deliberately kept me away from the woman who raised me when you couldn't. And I'm devastated that you excluded her from my wedding because you were too selfish to share credit for who I became." Lily's face crumpled. "I was protecting you from painful memories. I was protecting our relationship. If you had known how bad things got, how much I failed you." "You were protecting yourself," Hannah said, not unkindly but not softly either. "You were protecting your image as the perfect mother who overcame adversity. But in doing that, you erased the person who actually got us through that adversity." David stepped forward then, his expression troubled. "Lily, maybe we should listen to what Hannah is saying. I've been thinking about this all night, and some of the stories you told me about that time don't match up with what Sandra showed me yesterday." Lily turned on him with fury. "Not you too. She's gotten to everyone with her sob story and her fake documents." "They're not fake, Mom," Hannah said quietly. "I remember now. Not everything, but enough. I remember living here, sleeping in the purple room, feeling safe when everything else in my world was falling apart. I remember Grandma Sandra being the only stable thing in my life for months." "You were 7 years old," Lily protested. "Children's memories aren't reliable. You're letting her convince you that." "I'm not letting anyone convince me of anything," Hannah interrupted. "I'm looking at hospital records with her name on them. I'm looking at school papers where teachers addressed her as my caregiver. I'm looking at photographs that show exactly how much she was part of my daily life during that year. Lily looked around my living room wildly, as if searching for allies or escape routes. Her gaze landed on the photo album still spread across my coffee table, evidence of the months she had tried so hard to erase from history. Fine, she said, her voice brittle with defeat. Fine, maybe I downplayed her role during that time. But I got better, Hannah. I got sober, I became the mother you deserved. Doesn't that count for anything? Of course it counts, Hannah said, and I could hear the love still there underneath the hurt. Mom, I'm grateful for the mother you became. I'm grateful that you fought your way back to sobriety and stability. But being grateful for that doesn't mean I have to pretend the past didn't happen, or that Grandma Sandra doesn't deserve credit for keeping me safe while you got better. I never meant for you to lose your relationship with her, Lily said weakly. Yes, you did, Hannah replied, and the simple honesty of it hung in the air like a confession. Maybe not at first, but eventually you realized that having me close to her meant I might remember things you didn't want me to remember. So you encouraged me to pull away, told me she was getting old and didn't want to be bothered, made me feel guilty for wanting to maintain our relationship. Lily didn't deny it. She couldn't because we all knew it was true. What happens now? David asked quietly. Hannah looked at me, then at her mother, then back at me again. Now we start over. All of us. No more lies, no more editing history to make anyone look better or worse than they were. No more protecting me from truths I'm old enough to handle. She turned to Lily with an expression that was both loving and firm. Mom, I need time to process all of this. I need space to rebuild my relationship with Grandma Sandra, without feeling like I'm betraying you by loving her. And I need you to acknowledge what really happened, not just to me but to her. She sacrificed her own relationship with me to protect your reputation. The least you can do is be honest about that. Lily's shoulders sagged, and for the first time since she had arrived, she looked genuinely ashamed rather than just panicked. I'm sorry, she whispered, though it wasn't clear if she was talking to Hannah or to me. Sorry isn't enough, Hannah said gently. But it's a start. She turned to me then, and I saw my granddaughter clearly for the first time in years. Not the distant young woman Lily had described, but the strong, thoughtful person she had grown into despite the manipulation and lies. Grandma Sandra, I want to postpone my honeymoon so we can spend some real time together. I want to hear all the stories Mom edited out. See all the pictures she didn't want me to remember. I want to understand who I really was during those months, and who you were to me. My throat tightened with emotion. Are you sure? You just got married yesterday. You should be starting your new life with your husband. I am starting my new life, Hannah said simply. But I can't move forward honestly until I understand my past honestly. Marcus will understand. He loves me enough to want me to be whole. She paused, looking around my living room one more time. Besides, I think I need to remember what it felt like to be loved unconditionally, before I can fully appreciate having that again. 2 months later, Hannah and Marcus had their delayed honeymoon. By then she had spent countless hours in my house, looking through photo albums and listening to stories, filling in the gaps that Lily's revised history had created. She had remembered more than I expected, sensory memories of safety and routine that helped her understand why certain smells and sounds had always made her feel homesick for something she couldn't name. Lily and I had reached an uneasy truce. She never fully apologized for the years of manipulation, but she stopped trying to control Hannah's relationship with me. David, to his credit, encouraged her to be more honest about the past, and helped her understand that Hannah's love for me didn't diminish Hannah's love for her. The letter I had left in that church pew had indeed changed everything, just not in the way I had expected. I had thought it might help Hannah understand why I had been pushed out of her life. Instead, it had helped her understand that she had the power to decide for herself who belonged in her life and how. On Hannah's 27th birthday, she brought Marcus to my house for dinner, a tradition we were starting fresh. As I watched them in my kitchen, Hannah teaching her husband to make my famous chocolate chip cookies while telling him stories about her childhood that finally included me, I realized that the letter had given me something more valuable than vindication. It had given me back my granddaughter, not as the confused child who had needed me to survive her mother's breakdown, but as a strong woman who chose to love me fully and honestly. And that, I thought as I watched Hannah laugh at something Marcus said while Flower dusted her hair, was worth every moment of pain the truth had cost us.